All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Hope everybody enjoyed the break, had the opportunity to discuss some of the thought-provoking presentations we had this morning. They were certainly insightful and relevant, and again, I think there's a lot there to think about. So we will now have our first panel discussion chaired by Major General Andy Niebel, Marine Corps Assistant Deputy Commandant for Installations and Logistics. He assumed his current duties at Headquarters Marine Corps in July 2025. General Niebel graduated from East Stroudsburg University in 1989 and was commissioned through Officer Candidate's course in 1992. Following his initial training as a combat engineer officer, he held a variety of billets in the Fleet Marine Force Supporting Establishment and the Joint Community. He's a graduate of Amphibious Warfare School, Marine Corps Commanding Staff College, Naval War College, and United Kingdom's Higher Command and Staff Course. He holds master's degrees in Organizational Management, National Security, and Strategic Studies. And prior to his current assignment, he was Commanding General, 1st Marine Logistics Group, Camp Pendleton. Ladies and gentlemen, General Niebel.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. First off, I want to thank all of you for attending, taking time out on short notice change here to come to the symposium today. I have the honor of being able to moderate the first plenary session on a topic that I think is pretty fascinating, something that's intrigued me for quite a while. You hear different versions and variations of it. Logistics as maneuver, the deterrent effect, those types of things. I think that you've heard it for years now that signals there is a change in the way that we are thinking about sustainment and logistics in our department. You heard a lot of the messaging about this morning from our keynote speakers about a change in mindset in the way that we view logistics. That kind of underpins everything that I think this conference is about, and certainly what this panel will discuss. I am, as Mr. Kelleher said, General Andy Niebel. Right now I'm up at Headquarters Marine Corps, the Director for Logistics Plans, Policy, and Strategic Mobility. What we'll do today is we'll go through a series of questions that I've got for the panel members. We're not going to go through detailed introductions, but rather we're going to go through kind of their thoughts to kind of prime the pump on, for you all, on how this panel will, what direction this panel will go. It's on the deterrent effect through a logistics lens. And I'd be willing to bet that if I asked everyone to break out a pen and paper right now and define what that is in a few sentences, that we'd probably have about 1,500, 2,000 different variations of that. And that's good. You'll see from our panel members, we've got various backgrounds, various perspectives, and that's what we want at the end of the day, to triangulate thoughts, opinions, experiences for everybody in here to get something out of this and walk away with a different understanding, maybe than what you came in with about the deterrent effect of logistics. I would say it's like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. And for those English majors out there, is it a noun? It's a noun. Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? Depends on where you sit. So, getting into deterrence itself, what is deterrence? I will start out, and this is what I've asked the panel members to do to start out, is give their version, a brief introduction of themselves, and then their thoughts on what deterrence is in terms of logistics. I will say this: we don't deter countries from doing dumb things. Just take a look at the news and you can see that there's a lot of dumb things that are happening around the world. But what I think deterrence does, it influences, we deter actions by influencing decision making. And some of the things that we deter, we may never know. You need three things for certain for deterrence to work. The first thing is you need the capability to do something. The second thing you need is the willingness to take action on that capability that you have. And the third thing, and maybe the most important for deterrence to have an effect, is the perception of your adversary needs to be that you will take action on the capability that you have. If you don't have all three of those, the leg on one of the stools will fall, and the stool will fall over. And I think you've seen that. There's plenty of examples now of how those three things are creating, or in the past maybe did not create a deterrent effect. As I said, deterrence, I think, is different for each of us depending on where you sit. Where you sit is where you stand. But I want to offer a quick vignette just to get the juices flowing here. And I'm going to go back in time to 1948. And this was the Berlin airlift. This was just after World War II. It's when the Cold War really started in earnest. And the occupation of Germany, East and West Berlin. The Soviet Union had East Berlin, we had West Berlin, and there was a dispute over the currency form that would be used in West Berlin. This caused a blockade of West Berlin for Allied forces by the Soviet Union on both surface, water, rail, and road networks. And the Soviet Union never thought in their mind that we would conduct a sustainment effort over 15 months that would become the largest sustainment effort in military history. The numbers, if you look at this, are staggering, what was achieved. We supported 2 million citizens, supplied over 15 months, over 250,000 landings by what was the Army's Air Corps, then was now the new United States Air Force and the Royal Air Force. The Air Force delivered 1,783,537 tons of materials, mostly coal. Combined, they flew 92 million miles, and logistics eventually broke the siege over Berlin. And the Soviet Union, in their psyche, thought, if they can supply 2 million people for 15 months, imagine what they could do to an army. Now, what's not seen in there is all of the stuff that I call the unseen effect of a weapon, and that's our maintainers, that's our sustainers. That was industry building parts and keeping supply lines open to enable this incredible airlift to happen. And that created a deterrent effect, and we never went to war. Obviously, this ended with the lifting of the blockade. So with that, I will now turn it over to our distinguished panel members. Again, we've got industry, we've got folks in the supporting establishment at some of our agencies, and we've also got a variety of our services represented here today. I'm going to sit down and we'll just go left to right, and with that, please, introductions and a view on how you see logistics deterrence.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Patrick Lonnie, I'm the commander at DLA Weapons Support in Richmond, representative of the larger Defense Logistics Agency here on the panel. Really humbled to be up on stage with some outstanding experts. I know I'll probably learn a lot more than I'll be able to provide as far as perspective up here, but definitely representing an agency of over 25,000 outstanding people every day focused on supporting the warfighter. DLA's got as the nation's logistic combat support agency, has a very significant role in global supply chain, so the concept of deterrence is absolutely on the forefront. We're challenged in our annual guidance on how to get after it. And to speak a little bit before that, just to give my personal thoughts on log deterrence, when you think about I look at deterrence from a logistics perspective of there's a posture component to it, there's a velocity component to it, and a sustained component to it. Now, depending whether you're an acquirer, a maintainer, focusing specifically on the sustainment side, that definition may kind of resound with you in a different way. But I really look at it from those aspects, and there's a simultaneity component to it too. We all know that if some type of gunfight kicks off in one theater, the other theaters, we're going to have some considerations when it comes to that, and understanding that simultaneity as we think about postures, we think about velocity, we think about sustain, all the way back to the industrial base, the significant challenges that we face. But as far as the agency goes, very focused on 4 imperatives of people, precision, posture, and partnerships. And we're looking at that through the priorities that we have of setting the agency, setting supply chains, and setting the globe. When it comes to the people piece, there's a focus on really appreciating the fact of being a warfighting headquarters function and understanding what that means in terms of scope and scale that we could potentially face in a fight that could happen very quickly. But really looking at that investment for our people to gain more of an organizational flexibility in data literacy, data acumen, providing some opportunities to increase our ability to do analysis and interpretation of data, as well as some of the training that we have with some of our enterprise systems coming online, and just gives them an opportunity to be able to work quicker, smarter, faster, have the machines doing a lot of work while they can really hone in on the relationship piece and thinking forward to the next thing. And that really helps with the setting the agency piece. We think about from the standpoint of precision, it's really looking at if we really want logistics to deter, sustainment's got to be responsive and it's got to be resilient. So we're really thinking through the calibration piece. Demand forecasting is something that we're really focusing in on and truly getting what that actual demand signal is, understanding that it will fluctuate as the campaign evolves or just in the day-to-day operations, but really strengthening our ability of interoperability with that data from the services through us back to suppliers. That interoperability piece is really critical. And then using advanced technology. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we think about predictive analytics, really investing in that, again, to be able to get those cycles to turn quicker. And that helps us support now, as well as working pre-positioning and those type of solutions as we go forward. So that really primes us to be ready prior to any kind of onset. So that's how we're working at setting the supply chains. And then the third piece, when we talk posture, this is looking, again, back to the deterrence piece. It's got to be global, and it's got to be visible. So really looking at how do we strengthen what our position looks like now as far as an agency in terms of support, constantly adapting as the services evolve their concepts, as they evolve their strategies, looking at opportunities to posture in different locations to be more resilient, more redundant, and more responsive. Really looking at that, and it's not just a stack of inventory sitting somewhere, it's just making sure we've got the right assets in the locations, having the flexibility to move and maneuver along with operations as it goes, and just being ready, and that's going to help us on the side of setting the globe. And then finally on the partnership piece, DLA is in a very unique position. As we look at the log enterprise, we have a responsibility of that interoperability and integration across the services, across a lot of other federal stakeholders, across our allies and partners, and then also back to the industrial base. So we really have an opportunity there in terms of integration to the combatant commands and the services when we look at logistics planning and being part of that conversation and not having logistics separate from operational planning, but have that logistics nested directly in there to where we're able to inform as we go and also act as an interpreter or translator, as you will, back to the supplier and to the industrial base to have that free flow going. And that will put us in position to, opportunities to either grow capacity or make adjustments as we go forward. But all of that will provide a level of complexity against our adversaries and disrupt their ability to make decisions. So again, very thankful for the opportunity to be up on stage. Look forward to your questions in the discussion.
All right.
Thank you.
Tom?
My name is Tom Ray. I'm the Deputy Director for AMC Supply Chain Management Directorate, and I'm super honored to be here. And the questions, already this morning, I learned a lot from the session this morning. The discussion is very thoughtful. And it really resonates with a lot of the efforts that we're currently doing at AMC within our supply chain efforts. A little bit about myself. I spent I'm a manufacturing engineer. I spent 20 years in industry before coming over to the government in 2012, really in the Lean Six Sigma effort. So my background was in lean and supply chains, and really learned a lot on the differences between the government looks at how they look at inventory and response times to the way the industry was handling at those times. And so over the last, since 2012, I worked primarily with the organic industrial base because that's my background. I enjoy doing that, working on supply chains. And then most recently at AMC, working with the tactical edge and learning and seeing how we can distribute that inventory to do exactly what we're talking about, deter logistics. It's been fascinating. And in some of that learning, the Freedom's Forge is just that book that talks about what we did. You mentioned World War II, made me think about that. It's an amazing accomplishment, the partnership between industry and the military that understood a problem and really looked at what the requirements were and challenged the requirements. And so when a lot of that industry came over from Europe, the way that it was designed and the way that it was done was different for our American factories because we were reconstituting those factories. And so I've been enamored with that look at through my career here at the government, look at the supply chain, and trying to take another lens look through it, from an industry background. I don't always use all the acronyms, even though I've been in the government now I say I just got here, but it's been way over 10 years now, so it's interesting. I still get that excuse sometimes. But so now that I've been at Army Material Command, learning about the tactical edge, our commander, our General Mohan, his focus is, when we start looking at the tactical edge, it's not about more parts and more parts for readiness at the tactical edge. It's actually for less. And that's interesting because he's looking at unburdening the soldier. That's his theme. Whatever we're doing, unburden the soldier, let the soldier focus on what they do best. And logisticians should unburden them. So we're doing things with new technologies for property accountability, to take away the handwritten, all those processes that many of you in this audience probably is very familiar with. But we see that in the industry, any cycle counts of inventory, it's burdensome, to count and get that number right and then have to focus in that wrong area. That shouldn't be what they're focused on. General Mohan talks about single lift, agility. He doesn't want more containers with more parts to increase readiness, which is counter to what a lot of supply chain folks says. So, okay, well, let's look what the data says. You have these different variation, therefore I can calculate how much inventory you need there, and here's the lead time, so therefore you need 10 containers. He goes, no, I need one container. I need a single lift. Because the more containers you have, the more equipment you have to move it, the more people we need to count it, the more wrong it's going to be. And so we are working hard to meet that challenge. How can I do a single lift? Now what that means is I got to have some technology that tells me better what parts do I need. I need to learn predict my failures faster. And I need to be able to respond to that quickly. As we look at what some of the lessons learned from the Ukraine efforts, it's been a study in supply chain. I know many of you are doing the same. Some of the same parts that we thought that they were going to use are not the parts that they used. When we look at our data for some of the equipment that's being used, that's not the parts. We have plenty of the parts we thought we were going to use. We actually have too much, and we didn't get many of the parts that we didn't expect so much, the lower volume. So I've got to be able to have the agility there. So that's what we're focused on, is how do I use the technologies, the data to feed innovative approaches that flips the script to give us the agility we need from a supply chain.
Thanks, Tom. I think there's some tie-in maybe to what Mr. Singer talked about earlier this morning. To what
Exactly. He stole some of my talking points, actually. You'll see.
Erica. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you today and on this very impressive panel. I'd like to talk about what the Department of the Navy is doing to deter conflict through robust sustainment. From my point of view, deterrence is putting the adversary in a position where they assess whether or not they believe that they will be successful in a conflict. And our goal every day in the sustainment community and across the department is to make today not the day. that we have demonstrated a credible, resilient, and responsive network that enables us to be successful and demonstrate that we can fight and win. Our adversaries are assessing the totality of our naval forces. They are not just looking at our combat power, they are looking at our staying power. We must demonstrate, again, a credible, resilient, and responsive ecosystem that delivers the right material to the right place at the right time to fight and win our nation's wars when called at the time and place of our choosing. The Department of the Navy has a multi-pronged approach to operate in a contested logistics environment. This approach rests on our workforce, our commercial and organic industrial base, innovative, expanded sustainment technologies, and shared logistics operations with our partners and allies, not dissimilar to what the gentleman just said from DLA. The first and foremost is our workforce. Our government civilians, our industry partners, our military, our operators, our acquirers, our logisticians. All of you are so critical to making this engine run. And I want to say for all of those that are present and that are seeing us, thank you for what you do because we could not do it without you. We have amassed the greatest War Department across the globe, and we continue to demonstrate it every day. Today, the Department of the Navy is modernizing our organic industrial base to ensure that we have the right capability and capacity in peacetime and wartime. We are overcoming technical debt and adjusting to deliver the next century of naval power. In our naval shipyards, today we have 3 dry docks under construction. It may not sound, that we have 3 happening simultaneously, might not sound that impressive until you stand beneath the hull of an aircraft carrier and recognize the amount of work and the massive concentration that it takes in order to make that possible. We're modernizing dry docks that were built as early as 1910 and bringing them up to make them capable of sustaining our Ford-class aircraft carriers with nuclear power. Simultaneously, we're optimizing the layout and the technical components of our shipyards, and we're also taking those same thought processes and applying them to our aviation and our ground depots so that we can bring the latest technology, reduce the duration of depot maintenance, and make it possible for our artisans to be successful. Our commercial industrial base is equally as critical. We're using data analytics to understand our supply chain risk and make changes and, in some cases, investments in collaboration with our private industry partners. A great example of that is we have a new advanced technology center down in Danville, Virginia, where we're bringing together private partners and our organic facilities to bring on new workforce, bring them new training, and actually develop new techniques and processes to use our advanced technologies, which takes me to transformative sustainment technologies. We heard a lot about advanced manufacturing this morning from Mr. Zinger at Divergent. And the Department of the Navy strategy matches much of what he said this morning. We have a strategy that makes sure we are taking on commercial capability for repair and production, that we are modernizing our organic industrial base to bring in those same capabilities primarily for repair, but some fabrication. And we are putting those technologies in the hands of our warfighters so that they can deliver products to themselves using digital information at the point of need. All of this is underpinned by our ability to bring together all of the thought processes in order to actually push the demand signal to our industrial base. That means we have to qualify, we have to reprovision components that exist, and we have to deliver that through our logistics chains all the way to our industrial base. We're making progress, but it's slow, and all of us have an opportunity here to make that go faster. We're also using artificial intelligence and data integration to see ourselves, to predict our logistics needs, and offer operators scenario options based on our current state to help make decisions that will optimize our operations. And finally, our forward network of logistics is what keeps our forces forward. We have a 5,000-mile kill chain that we have to connect in order to make our operations flow. By pushing logistics forward and coordinating with our allies and partners, sharing technology, sharing data, we have the ability to demonstrate that we have credible capability and that we can demonstrate proficiency with repeated operations so that we know and our adversaries know that we can operate in high-end conflict. And that's all for now.
Thank you, Mr. Plath.
Thank you. I'm Tom Kiss. I'm the Director for Ship Management at Military Sea Lift Command in Norfolk. I'm kind of the lead at the command for force generation and readiness sustainment both today and into the future. And as some of the other panelists have pointed out here, deterrence is all about sending messages. Everyone wants to focus on counting platforms and weapon systems, but we know that the adversaries, go beyond that next step, and they want to understand, can the United States transport that power? Can we sustain that power over the space and the time and the distance that's required for the lethality part of the force to be successful? So that message could be sent a variety of ways. The gold standard is we've done something. The Berlin airlift was a great example of, people our adversaries saw that and realized that there's real capability there. They know how to use it. They get things done. And we certainly do that today in any kind of the contingencies that we find ourselves in around the world. We've got great examples of that. They also see it in our day-to-day operations. We operate around, the Navy in particular is operating around the world. MSC is there to sustain that, and so that's something that we message every day. And then, our exercises, our training, our wargaming, the other things that we do just for our own purposes, but also to send a signal that we are assessing ourselves and trying to get better on these things. Those also send messages. So, MSC is the naval component to the U.S. Transportation Command in support of the Joint Force requirements for TRANSCOM. We're an important enabler of Navy fleet capabilities around the world. And what that looks like for us on a day-to-day basis, we have anywhere between 120 to 140 ships operating in every commander AOR around the world, providing cargo, services, and support to the Navy and the rest of the Joint Force. Of that group, about 85 of those ships are government-owned ships that we operate for decades. There are workhorses, the base part of our force. The remainder comes from, we leverage capacity. We activate ships from marriage, ready reserve force. We charter with commercial industry to bring capacity on. And on any given day, there's 20 to 40 ships in that category beyond the government-owned inventory that are out working for us and the rest of our military. I was looking at our readiness brief earlier this week. We have 10 dry cargo ships moving things for the Army predominantly right now. We have 19 charters for tankers that are moving fuel for DLA Energy and others. And we have the demonstrated capability to contract for that. We have the relationship with commercial industry to send demand signals and work together with them to ensure that we've got the capacity that we need, not just today, but in a contingency. On the Navy side of things, 32 of those ships are combat logistics force platforms, the oilers, the dry cargo ships that sustain the fleet everywhere in the world. Last year, they supported over 900 underway replenishments where we transfer fuel, food, ammunition, and stores to the rest of the Navy to keep them underway and operational. We transferred about 18 million gallons of fuel. But we realized that that base force could be stressed, and we've had a theoretical capability to do something called console. It's consolidated cargo replenishments using commercial tankers. Due to some of our shortfalls in manning that we've had over the last several years, we have really operationalized that console capability where we take a commercial tanker, install some equipment, do some training, and the wartime theory is they bring the fuel to the CLF so the CLF stay close to where they're needed. But they also have the capability to demonstrate the passage of fuel from a console ship directly to an aircraft carrier or a large amphibious ship, and we've done that. We passed about 2 million gallons of fuel last year through those console demonstrations, and that's scalable. So within a matter of days or weeks, we can modify commercial ships to give us additional capacity to allow the CLF to focus on those things that they really need to do for the rest of the Navy. So that kind of describes all the day-to-day ops. You know, when you talk about surging in conflict, that's where our partners at the Maritime Administration come in through the Ready Reserve Force, which are 47 ships in a 5-day readiness status, and all the agreements that MARAD has with commercial partners where we can surge capacity in exchange for providing them some cargo preferences requirements now. So it doesn't cost the U.S. government a lot of money to do this. We sustain that commercial capacity. We use it and exercise it every day. So, you know, the combination of that peacetime demand signal, the demonstrated ability to surge a little bit kind of sends the message that we're trying to convey to others, is that the military of the United States is ready today, and we're going to be ready tomorrow, and we're not just ready for all of the peacetime things that we're seeing, which can be pretty amazing to the outside observer, whether it was the ops in the Red Sea 2 years ago, the strikes into Iran last year, or the ongoing operations in the Caribbean right now. It's all being sustained the way it needs to be, and it can be scaled. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I think there's a component what you're talking about in terms of messaging that maybe we'll come back to. Okay, Boeing, Ed.
Thank you. My name is Ed Girding. I'm the Vice President and Chief Engineer for government support engineering for Boeing Global Services out of St. Louis. In transparency, after 42 years, I will be stepping down later this year, but I'll tell you what, this is such a great topic. I was chomping at the bit to be part of this panel. First off, thank you all for your service to the country. Thanks for what you do around sustainment. And as a guy that likes to work on my car, as a kind of wrench turner my own self, you all have my heartfelt admiration and gratitude. But when I think of logistics as a deterrent, you know, I think, and actually Tom and I probably should have compared notes because I think he stole some of my thunder, but in all seriousness, it's action by doing. Secretary Rumsfeld years ago said, when you go to war, you go with what you have. You don't go with what you wish you had or what you'll have in the future. It's a here and now. And when I think of the best way to deter our adversaries, it's by doing. I love General Niebel's vignette on the Berlin airlift. I mean, talk about pulling together not just the United States, but all of our allies too, to supply 2 million people with food, clothing, et cetera, over an extended period of time. That just, you know, that'll, if you're an adversary, you have to stop and take notice of that. When I look at some of the recent events, you know, Operation Midnight Hammer that Tom referred to with the operations in Iran, yeah, okay, I realized that planning had been kind of in the works for years. However, to be able to pull it off so flawlessly, I think there was only one country in the world that could have pulled that off successfully. And then, okay, yeah, we know there's hot spots in the world, Middle East, South China Sea, et cetera, but the operations in on the Caribbean today to bring that level of support, manpower, weapons in short order, and then to actually pull off something so successful, that's just, you know, that's a testament to everything that you all do. To me, one of the challenges here at Boeing, so my organization, we support all the modernization, the sustainment, and the upgrades for all of our military platforms. We've got about 5,000 engineers around the world, most in the United States, of course, but I've got a team of about 600 folks in the United Kingdom and about 1,000 in Australia. And what we do is we don't just support the U.S., but all of our foreign allies and customers that fly P-8s, F-18s, et cetera. With that scale, that you know, you get the scale of geographic distance, you've got other countries, other services you're working with, and that adds a complexity factor, which again, you know, that's, if you're an adversary and we're able to demonstrate our ability to do that, that will make you stop and take notice. This is the point where my team knows, oh my God, Ed, with his 42 years, he's famous for telling stories. Here he goes with another story, and they start to roll their eyes. But One of my favorite stories was last year in the annual Air Force's Mobility Guardian exercise. First off, to demonstrate the partnership between industry and the military, we had some of our engineers, some of my team from C-17 that actually deployed to help support that. My favorite example was there were some C-17s that were taking part both from the USAF as well as the Royal Australian Air Force. One of the airplanes was basically hard broke. So the team that was deployed with the Australian force, they called up about 1,000 miles away down south to the U.S., my team from Charleston Air Force Base, and said, hey, we need so-and-so part. By chance, would you guys have one? Yeah, we do. Okay, how are we going to get it up there? So what they did is they got a map of Eastern Australia. They kind of plotted a route. They picked a halfway point that actually happened to be right on a beach. I'm not sure how they picked that and what they did to choose that, but regardless, they showed a great picture where they're basically meeting on the beach in casual clothes because they just grabbed what they had, got in the car and drove, grabbed the part, drove it back up north, got the other airplane going. I mean, stuff like that. That's what really demonstrates to me the power and the ability to do it, scale, complexity, and over large geographic distances.
Excellent, thank you, Ed. We'll get into questions now. We've got some questions rolling in, which we'll get to after the end of the prepared questions. I can see that there's no softballs here coming in, so thanks for that. All right, the first one, I'd like Ms. Plath, if you wouldn't mind taking on the lead for this one, and others can join in as needed. But the question revolves around kind of does the audio match the visual here? And I call it the strategy logistics mismatch. Our national security strategy emphasizes strategic competition and global presence, yet our logistics posture often seems tethered to legacy infrastructure and just-in-time principles. How do we bridge the gap between our stated national objectives and the physical reality of our supply chains, and where is the most significant misalignment today between our strategic goals and our logistics capabilities?
Thank you very much for the question. We cannot assume that our air and sea lanes will be uncontested in the future. We must implement a distributed network of nodes, smaller, resilient, and ally-supported, that are in our key theaters. By doing this, we create the benefits of mass without the risks of concentration. In doing so, we create flexibility to keep our forces forward and make sure that we can operate in any environment at any time.
Excellent, thank you. So any of the other panel members here, this is in terms of the mismatch for the audio and the visual. I think sometimes in terms of where we want to go and where we are, and turning that switch oftentimes doesn't happen overnight. In other words, concept into reality, maybe for Boeing on production or some of the others that are in supply chain. Any thoughts?
When I think of what Erica was talking about with data analytics, there is so much to be harnessed there. In my view, my vision is to get the reams of data that exist, get it together in some comprehensive, actionable format, and give it to the decision makers. One of my visions would be, imagine a time with the power of data analytics and communication where you get an F-18 that takes off from a carrier to do its mission, unbeknownst to the pilot even. The data analytics knows that there's a certain critical LRU, that if it sees temperature spikes, that's kind of an early sign that it's on its last legs. So unbeknownst to the pilot, through the Link 16, it sends a signal back to the ship. The maintenance officer gets that, and that person now has a decision. They can say, okay, well, you know what? This is, let me look ahead on the duty schedule. What's the next mission for the aircraft? I need to have that. It's a no-fail mission. So I'm going to go to stores. I'm going to pull the part, have the part ready when the airplane lands. We'll get it down to the hangar bay. We'll swap it out and have it ready to go. Or It's like, that is a little bit invasive stuff, but you know what? I think we could probably get through the information we're getting another 2, 3, 4 missions with the missions that it's got. I think I'll defer it for a little bit. But you know what? That is the power of data analytics. What we can't tolerate, and I think Secretary Duffy mentioned it earlier today, was the slowness, the inability, whether you're waiting on a disposition or you're waiting on a part or something. Hard broke airplanes, AOGs, that just won't cut it in today's world. Operational availability is foremost. So to me, that's kind of where I think industry would like to see this go.
Great, thank you. Thinking differently. I think, did you have a comment?
Yeah, sir, I just, whatever solutions that we come up with, they have got to solve for the simultaneity piece. I know I've already said that, but just when we think about the conflicts that we could face, we talk about the O plan, the tip fid, it's multiple things are going to be kicking off and also with a focus on Homeland Security and all the other things that are being going off. So that simultaneity piece is critical. We've really got to interrogate closing the velocity gap too. And that velocity could be enter into theater to distribution. It could be the velocity that the industrial base is turning things, or the velocity of the change in branch and sequels in planning when the adversary gives a vote and does something either more effectively than we thought or has changed the dynamic. So looking across the board in the agency, we're focused in one area on the Global Resiliency Initiative, where we're working with services and identifying specifically types of requirements, locations where they need to be, and doing what we can to reset and reposture how we are organized to where we're supporting that. And a couple other areas, seeking opportunities within the regional sustainment framework. There's a lot of OEMs and a lot of other entities that are postured globally and looking at where we can see in there. And I'm thinking something, and this has been mentioned before, this is not my idea or anything, but we have Civil Reserve Air Fleet, we have the Visa, we have those type of things. What's the equivalent of that for Class 9? Where are there areas where we can have a contract let to where at onset or certain conditions, we have access to a level of stock in certain locations and then can maneuver from there. Those are just a couple of thoughts on that.
That's great. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah.
I've got a couple comments on that too. So from my perspective, what we're doing in the Army, I think we're on the cutting edge of transparency and illuminating our supply chain. And we can see now from the tactical edge all the way to our industrial base, our organic industrial base, and there's a lot of information and data. And what we're finding is, our vision is to be able to use this new technologies to tie all this together, all these databases and systems together so that we can make decisions faster. And what I think we're finding is we're actually making decisions slower, because the more information and we start realizing the complexity, we start to pause we start asking good questions. How does this impact this, and what does this impact? So we are working to learn from that and fail faster, so that we can digitally fail and model things. So we can say, hey, if that, then this. So we have this Weapon System 360 model that we've rolled out. I think we're learning from it. It's only been a year. Not even a year, we've been implementing this. And so we're looking at this concept of what we're calling super signals. This is not a new concept, but it's basically as a new driver, you're a 16-year-old, driving's not that hard, right? Unless you've never drove before, and you're sitting at a four-way stop and you look at all of the signals that's coming to you. Do I go? Do I stop? Are they gonna go? What are the different environment? I think that's sometime we are at that stage right now. There's so much data coming to us, whereas an experienced driver, you can drive home. I drive home from work many times and don't even remember going through four-way stops. Why? Because these super signals that tell us, our brain says, I know I can go. And that's where we've got to get to, so that we don't spend that velocity of decision-making. We know immediately what to do with the systems that we have, that technology. And you know what? Sometimes you're going to get to a fender bender, but ultimately, most of the time, you're going through making the right decisions and letting the data drive us. By the way, coming into Phoenix for the first time, I start to see those, the electronic cars that are driving, no drivers. I mean, here we are, right? So technology is here that can make decisions for us. We just have to embrace it.
Yeah, I think there's, for those of us that came in a while ago and we were on typewriters, there was a discussion earlier, and then we went to the, IBM came up with a selectric ball. People remember that. And then we really jumped and got into blue mail. Does anybody remember blue mail before regular email? All of this was an aim to get more productive and to be able to do more in the day, in a single day. And as we advance, that may be another topic of conversation with the amount of data that we're getting, the importance of being able to make informed decision-making quickly. Okay, second question, Tom, I'm going to lean to you on this one to start this one off, but it's, I call this one the industrial orchestra. True logistics deterrence requires a seamless partnership between the military and the industrial base. From the AMC perspective, what is the biggest barrier to surging production for a contingency? And from the other agencies in private industry, what is the primary policy or acquisition hurdle that you would eliminate tomorrow to make it easier for industry to respond at scale and speed?
That's a great question, and something we deal with, actually, talk about surge a lot. We have 23 organic industrial bases within the Army footprint, and each site we talk about, well, what do we surge for what, how long, what is let's define what surge means. That's always a challenge. And at what point in the conflict or will the surge happen? Is it prior to, is it after, those kinds of things. So I have come to the realization, and many of you in this room already have, you mentioned velocity, it's time. The biggest barrier is time. And that's not new. That's been here. That's, ageless. I think about this morning, they talked about Kelly Johnson and Skunk Works. Early in my manufacturing, as a manufacturing engineer, I got annoyed in the lean guy, right? And so some of my training, we read the Skunk Works. Here I am in industry reading about the Skunk Works as the model on how to break down barriers and move fast to do amazing things. And so what did they do? They tore through the red tape. They brought the people together. The key thing they did, also from my perspective, was they put engineers on the floor. They took the test pilots within the room, and they got immediate feedback, and they weren't afraid to fail. Now, the test pilots may say it's different, but they found ways to fail with low risk, to learn from that, to build to much larger events. And so we have to do the same thing. We can do that, and we need to. Look at the Apollo program, but similar. Today, you can see in industry, we have, the model's been changed, right? We have SpaceX, has challenged the NASA model. And if you read much about how they were able to do that, they have done the exact same things that the Skunk Works teams have done. They've torn through the red tape. They challenged the requirements. They have deleted processes and asked why. They fail fast is their theme. And so when I talk to our teams, there's no reason we can't do this. Let's challenge the status quo. Our director, Rich Martin, talks about that all the time. I refuse the status quo. Challenge what we're doing. Look at that technology, but don't be a chain to technology. It's much on how we can partner with the industry, because they are doing these very same things. Ask them questions. So one of the things in our Weapons System 360 model is a Supply 360 that basically we're sharing data now. It's only months old, but with DLA to be able to say, hey, we want to show you our consumption. One of the things I learned in my industry background working with suppliers was I could almost solve every problem if I just showed them closer to my consumption. If we talked about what the purchase requisitions were, if we talked about what the forecast was, I met with Boeing several times, and they would go, hey, we know your demands better than you do because we see them all, right? So why am I spending all this time projecting when I can just show you my consumption data? And so that's what they want. And if we partner with the industry bases, I believe we'll start seeing their innovative ideas. If we share more close-held kind of information that we think is so critical, but it's also critical to them to be able to be responsive. So time is definitely the constraint. And so, when we look at challenging how we address that, sit down in the rooms, challenge the regulation, challenge the policies. Our commander there at AMC, we have a parts qualification memo where he has the ability to qualify parts. Now, we've got to manage the risk through that. But he's broken through barriers. And if 5 years ago or even shorter, if somebody said, yeah, AMC is going to hold the part qualification stamp, No way. There's no way the engineering community is going to agree, we do that, but we're doing it. And we're working closely with our DevCom and engineering. We had 60 parts in 60 days that we partnered with industry and our OIB to create, qualified parts, and we did it. And that's the innovation that we need. Why? We did all those things we talked about. They challenged it. They were not afraid to fail. It's been, I think that's what we have to do. We have to keep driving through, and any regulation or policy that slows us down, there's many.
Yeah, I think, as you talk through this, it sounds a little bit like the acquisition reform where you're aligning disparate agencies into a single agency towards a common purpose. Any other thoughts from the panel members? Yeah.
Yeah, to tag on a little bit with what Tom was saying, to me, from an industry perspective, the number one thing that could really help is the predictability. And Secretary Duffy, again, mentioned it earlier this morning, like using the Lockheed Martin PAC-3 contract as an example. So maybe people sometimes don't really understand how difficult it is when a customer comes to us and says, hey, Boeing, we need 2 of these. It's like, okay, well, a couple problems. One, it's going to be really hard to spool up a big production line for 2. And we were talking earlier this morning about RFP or a requirement that came out. Well, it hadn't been bought since 1974. So are there even suppliers out there? So when you have such small quantities, that's a problem. However, so if you can kind of lump things up, the multi-year buy, and again, I'm just trying to make it as predictable as we can so we can count on something. And when we work with our sub-tier suppliers, they're guaranteed, hey, there will be, you'll be able to recover your non-recurring. Because the 3 things that bother me. Number 1 would be the amount of no bids we get. Number 2 is that even if somebody is willing to provide the part, we won't like the cost, and it's not the, overpriced hammer or whatever. What it is you don't have that many units to amortize the immense non-recurring. So to that point, one of my favorite examples would be where I believe we need to work closely with folks like DLA, for example. So when they ask for a part, as an engineering perspective, we can say, hey, the part you're looking for is from a die forging. The die forging dies were scrapped 30 years ago. A new die forging die would be not only 6 figures, but it would probably be 24 months of lead time to even get the die forging, not to mention the amount of time it would then take to turn it into an actual part. But from an engineering perspective, maybe we can maybe we can make it out of a machine hog out. Maybe we could do something different so that we can support the warfighter in a more timely, more cost-effective manner, but also provide that information up front to file it away. So it's like, okay, well, next time I have something like that, worked with Boeing or Northrop or whoever for this solution, maybe we could do something similar next time. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna hold you in the hot seat here for a minute and go on to another question that I think is germane to deterrence. And when we talk about, I talked about those 3 things. The third one, your adversary has to perceive that you are willing to use the capability that you have. And this one's around aged weapon systems and equipment. We will have airframes that approach or even exceed 100 years. The KC-135, the B-52, and even the C-17 is slated to fly until at least 2075. So knowing that not only do old platforms tend to wear and break more, how do we get ahead of this and anticipate so we don't have airplanes down for months or years waiting on parts and repairs? Second part. And of course, safety. How do we ensure that the aircraft are safe even well beyond their original design life?
That to me is fascinating. I hope you all caught that, what General Niebel mentioned. 100 years, can you think about it? The B-52, I'm pretty old, but the B-52, that was actually, the drawings are from 1948, believe it or not. Production line stretched until 1962, the year I was born, I believe. KC-135, not too far behind. C-17, a lot of us, including me, still think that's a fairly new platform, but did you all realize that was designed in the mid to late 1980s? So 2075, 50 years from now, we will have airframes that last for 100 years. I remember years ago, where it really brought home to me was I was meeting with my Air Force counterpart in Oklahoma City, the chief engineer for the KC-135 program, and he was saying, Ed, on the 135, we're so far beyond the design life, we don't even know what problems we're going to continue to have. So how do we get ahead of this? And about 5 years later, something called the aft terminal fitting. Nothing too critical. All it is a big machine part that holds the wing onto the fuselage, right? So, but it's like we started to see major corrosion in those. And oh, by the way, those aren't the easiest parts to remove. The airplane's going to be down for some time. So, in hindsight, what are we doing? We working with the military to work on new technology to get ahead of this. Maybe it's advanced non-destructive inspection. Maybe, because by the time you get ready to send the airplane back and then you find major corrosion on an aft terminal fitting, a belly skin or something, that's an awful bad time to find it. You would have wanted to know that up front when you inducted it. So what can we do through new technology? And I loved Mr. Zinger's comments about the digital environment. That's great. However, these platforms that go back many years, there is no digital, or there was none. I can tell you what, though. The Air Force has asked us for C-17, hey, we need to bring this model into the 21st century. We expect you, Boeing, to partner with us to help make it digital. And the whole idea is you wrap, and Mr. Zinger did a great job at describing it. It's not just having a 3D model or anything like that, but it's tying the requirements into the model, to the manufacturing plan, to the supply chain, to the certification, which includes safety and airworthiness. So if you do make a change, it's like bang, bang, bang. It's not like a big bureaucratic thing where it has to go through the crank. But to me, it's using new technology on these older platforms. Now, that being said, and this may not be the most attractive thing that I say today, but while we still have stuff in the old day definition, meaning 2D drawings and stuff, we need today's engineers and suppliers to be able to utilize that old data and then turn it into today's parts. And frankly, that's not easy. A lot of people don't want to do that. We've been given a lot of feedback from suppliers. We're going to no bid that unless you, Boeing, create a model. Well, there never was a model. It's B-52. Well, you know what? We have to think ahead to what can we do jointly to support the warfighter. So that's where I'm thinking about the old legacy platforms. It's a great question, and to me, a very challenging thing we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a signaling and messaging piece to that too. To get back to an earlier point, when we talk rebuild, don't go back and rebuild something that's old. Rebuild it towards a modern, relevant threat. Any other comments from the panelists on that question? Okay, I'm going to go to a lead for Mr. Kiss on this one here, and I'm going to talk about our abstract for this one, talk about balancing investment and layered investments to create a deterrent effect over time. It also talked about appropriately timed funding. So in a fiscally constrained environment, leaders must often choose between investing in future capabilities and maintaining current readiness. How should the Department of War balance these competing demands to ensure our logistics posture is a credible deterrent both today and into 2035 timeframe?
Yeah, so that's such a loaded question, right? Because that's the world that we live in the world where resources are never enough. There's nobody out there, probably nobody on this stage, who doesn't think if I had one more day, one more dollar, one more person, I could do all these great things with it. And then on the other side, we find ourselves all too often faced with, I'm going to make the least bad decision I can right here, but I recognize it's a bad decision. And so the trick is, how do you get somewhere back in the middle where it's a decision that we can all kind of live with? And I think it really focuses a little bit on the capacity, capability trade-offs. There are capabilities that we need. We've got to develop those. If we're not developing the future capabilities, they won't be here when we need them. There will be, we may fly C-17s for 100 years, but there will be an aircraft behind that C-17, I hope, at that point. And then how do you scale things? So you may not be able to get the capacity that you want, but how do we get capabilities developed so we're thinking upfront about how we can scale that in a conflict? And like for MSC, we scale by relying on commercial industry. We know there is shipping capacity to move cargo and things. We've got the contracting capability where we will go out and get it and use it. We're sensitive to the fact that, there's maybe not unlimited capacity, or maybe some of that capacity is Chinese flagged or owned ships, which are probably not good ones that we should consider using. But how do we foster that relationship with industry for how we can scale and grow those capabilities? And then the last thing I would say is, the hard part of that question is the force of 2035 or 2036 is predominantly the force that we have right today. If I look at my fleet, most of those 85 ships that I told you I have are still going to be here in 2036. So we've absolutely got to sustain the current readiness because that is the future readiness. But I am going to need new ships at some point, and so we've got to find a way to build those when we need them as well.
Thank you. Any other comments on funding, layered strategy? We work in 5-year increments here. Policy or changes, requirements change, and I think that's part of the reason why we're conducting acquisition strategy reform. Okay, I'm going to, in the interest of time here, I'm going to go to some of the questions that have come in from you all out here. For those that don't know, they don't have the app, there's a voting system, so as questions come in, they get vetted and voted upon, and we'll start with the question that has the most votes, and I will read it to the panel here. Okay, coming in first place right now. What strategies do we have to gain the necessary data rights, i.e. right to repair, in order to support regional sustainment framework and other fixed forward initiatives?
So I'll start.
Please, yeah, Ms. Black.
And I'm sure other panelists will jump in. I kind of hear two different themes in that question, and so I'm going to break it up into two parts. One is how do we enable the regional sustainment framework, and the other is really, we're going to talk a little bit about data rights, and I'm going to use sort of new technology implementation as a vehicle to discuss that. So on the regional sustainment framework side, the Department of Navy has been working with Congress to the point about credibility and proficiency and creating a logistics network that spans the globe so that we can keep our forces forward. The reality is that many of our industry partners, and I'm going to talk about our ships and ship maintenance forward, we want to have and develop proficiency amongst a variety of depot maintenance providers around the world in case our ships need support forward. And we're finding that many of those providers are not used to working on military specifications. And part of the reason why Congress authorized us in the 25 NDAA to start to develop planned maintenance proficiency was to actually share the information on contract with the specifications of our vessels so that we could work through the details and the agreements on data sharing, processes, to be, at the most simplistic, but it's not a small thing. We think in English measurements and they may think in metric, and being able to translate between the two is key to our proficiency. So it is developing those contractual relationships, working them over time, iterating like we've already talked about in order to gain proficiency. Now, that also applies to new technologies. So, we've talked a lot, we've seen Divergent's presentation on advanced manufacturing. And I will say we have needed to clarify and refine our guidance on how to do reverse engineering to manage obsolescence, to work with providers that may not, or maybe there was a provider that originally built a component that is either no longer in existence or has evolved away from the current, that instantiation to a new one. How do we handle reverse engineering guidance? There is so much work going on what we do to both protect our industry partners and make sure that they remain viable, because that's critical to our health, and to be able to operate, manage obsolescence, and even develop new technologies. So we've been working really closely with our intellectual property lawyers to release that guidance. I know that our guidance mimics that, which has been released by the Air Force, so we've been working with the Army and across the Department of War to get after that. There is also a lot of work on right to repair. So I'll credit our NavAir group with really getting frustrated primarily over our ability to do intermediate maintenance, diagnostics. When you think about your car, can you drive to AutoZone and just have someone plug in that little diagnostic code reader to tell you what's wrong with your car? We were finding that we were needing to fly people to our ships forward in order to carry a diagnostic computer. So we are working again with Congress to better and more clearly define OMIT data, so operations, maintenance, installation, training data, so that we have the ability to support our operators in a way that still protects our industry providers and makes sure that they're viable, but enables our operators, our artisans, to be able to operate and keep our forces forward.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah.
One thing from industry, and somebody real smart one time called it the tyranny of distance, but, when we do have a contested logistics environment like that, and the fight's 10,000 miles away, the last thing we can do is bring the assets back to to CONUS and to overhaul them, whether it's at our facilities in San Antonio or Jacksonville, the FRC at North Island, Tinker ALC, whatever. But what can we do to have stuff closer to the fight? So what Boeing is looking at is leveraging our workers across the world. We've got footprints in the Middle East, we've got them in Europe, we've got them in the Asia Pacific region. So what can we do to stand up a MRO there so that it is close to the fight? And oh, by the way, more than likely it would be something that would be co-joined or co-sponsored likely with our allies, for example, Australia or somebody, New Zealand, whoever. But it seems like that is the natural thing. We have to get closer to the fight. And oh, by the way, the old thing about, some of that can be done eye level, but it needs to go back O level, back to the states. We need to get those MROs the increased skills, training, and the authority to do more and more complex work in order to keep the warfighter going.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to move on to our next question. So thank you for those great responses. The next one is, and maybe DLA will have something to say with this. How are we moving forward with creating a joint logistics enterprise by allowing the individual service supply and maintenance information systems to integrate, i.e. ordering parts from a sister service, creating a repair order creating a repair order with a sister service? And not putting the button on you, but if anybody's got some thoughts on that, I know that the Marine Corps with Marine Rotational Forces Darwin is doing this not only with other services, but also with our joint partners. But any thoughts from any members on the panel?
I think, excuse me, I think some of it is certainly how can we share that data across the board to where everyone actually there's a visibility piece to it. So from a service standpoint, if it's consumable, certainly agency is part of that. Making sure that is also seen from a supplier standpoint, so there's a level of visibility. I think there's a funding component to it as well in terms of, and I can get into a little bit some of the policy constraints and I've seen that as a log plans officer a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, working personnel recovery called CSAR at the time. You're looking at a 3-ship HH-60 package. You've got one set of rotor blades, and that's what you've got on the ragged edge of freedom, alone and unafraid. And you look across the flight line and see a cab sitting there, a Combat Aviation Brigade full of a lot of parts that you want to gain access to if you can, but you're not able to even if you're staring right at it. We've seen some examples in locations, services with Osprey and some other areas too. So definitely sense the frustration piece, but there is a visibility and trying to get systems connected together, and then the financial transaction piece, trying to make that work. It is is a challenge that we're seeing across the services that are utilizing the same weapon systems. And there's also an angle to take of how do we scale that even further to our allies and partners. There's ways, you look at systems that we operate today, there's got to be better ways and methods of, hey, it's right there, I can get it, I'm the priority, let's go.
Yeah, there's, you see in a lot of the Annex Ds, in accordance with Title 10 responsibility, service have their own responsibilities for logistics and sustainment. And there's a push now, and for those that ask the question, I don't know if there's a great answer, but when you dial it up even more into the combined, joint and combined with coalition forces, it really gets challenging, but something that we've got to do because we are pointing that direction.
I'll make a quick comment on that. We're working with DLA on what we're calling the agility layer. I think all the services are playing in this area a little bit. And it's been interesting to see, I call them silos of excellence. We have that within the Army ourselves, right? Unit, division, brigades, they have their own parts. So it's challenging enough for us to be able to say, no, we need those parts here and having the technology to make some of those decisions. So we just have to go in this with our eyes wide open as we go across the joint services because everybody, the prioritization, getting decisions on what's the actual priorities is sometimes more challenging than we think because what's evident to one person, one commander, is not so evident to another. And so having some of those conflicts has been healthy discussions. And I think as we continue to see the data and see the need and see the priorities and align that, I think it's going to make us stronger and we'll make faster decisions. But I think this technology is allowing us to see things way real time. I mean, the Chief of Staff of the Army has this type of information at his fingertips every day. And we're learning how to respond to that when he asks a question. Hey, why are you rating this? Why are you moving these parts? What are you doing? We don't want him to be the maintenance officer, right. But we're still learning through how to use this data. Yeah.
So on that same point, I think this is a real opportunity for us to think about artificial intelligence, but very specifically large language models.
Yes.
So there are new systems coming online just even in the last year or two where, historically we've said for logistics IT system, we need to create an entirely new IT system. We are breaking that concept apart. Using large language models, our existing systems, we can aggregate across rather than have to generate new systems.
That's right.
And our data is unstructured, which means that there's a lot of text fields and things like that. I always joke that internal to the Navy, our way of reporting a casualty has not been refined by time since World War II. It's still the same typewriter form. We just turned it into a spreadsheet, and that became a structured database. And that structured database, we use some software, but we're actually still typewritering in the same form. So what does that mean? Having done it myself, if you want to know how much impact corrosion is having, think of every way, and my heart goes out to every sailor, but every way a sailor could misspell the word corrosion and rust and try and figure out how many times we had that problem and on what components so that the acquisition community and our engineers can actually attack that problem and eliminate it. Large language models are changing the way that we do this. Instead of having an O3 and a watch floor type up, and then insert an extra layer of misspelling, now we can actually load that language, we can figure out what's happening, we can trend it, and then we can predict it. And today, the chiefs of staff of the services are seeing those predictions, and our operators are able to start making operational decisions about, wow, they're going to run out of fresh fruits and vegetables in 3 days. We need to change how the CLF is going to come in and resupply this zone. We're going to move things around dynamically. Our data exists, and now we have the software and the technology to actually integrate it, get it to the right folks, and actually act on it, which will make us faster and better and more resilient.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Okay, next question here. 20 plus years in the GWOT highlighted that our resilience or reliance on contracts created a huge deficit in maintainer proficiency amongst our warfighters. Moving forward, how do we balance rapid modernization with preserving that proficiency?
I know one of the things that I mentioned the 23 organic industrial bases and the fluctuation in workload. Obviously, we want to keep our workforce skilled and on, maintaining that. But at the same time, we've also seen technology allowing us to leverage technology to always in Lean, we always say, make it really, really easy to do it right and impossible to do it wrong. So I've got to use technology to be able to train people to come in and immediately be able to be productive. Our industry partners are doing that in their production lines today. So we have AI and paint booths where they're, virtual reality to teach them how to do painting and things, so they can fail on a virtual helicopter instead of, the real one. And so that way we can train them faster, get them up to speed, take people off the street or our veterans and put them to work more, quickly to be value added. Now that didn't say, we've got to have some sustainable workload to maintain those capabilities, because otherwise we just can't financially. The solvency of our organic industrial base is critical, and so we can't, just in case, have all this capability in the workforce. So we've got to figure out that balance. But that's one of the ways we're looking at trying to do that, is using technology.
Yeah, there's a case to be made about the apprentice journeyman, master technician. How do you get there with a smaller workforce? And that's certainly one of the ways. Any other thoughts on that?
We have some challenges in the same way on our ships. I have civilian licensed credentialed mariners that sail our ships, and we have seen kind of the same decline in their ability to self-help and fix things themselves, partly caused by our manning shortfalls, partly caused by overall labor shortfalls in the industry. But one thing that we're doing is a commercial best practice, is we are bringing on our OEMs to work on our ships, and we were providing them labor. They send a superintendent, maybe another person, they bring parts and tools, and then we give them the labor, and together they work on engine maintenance, for example. They do a 45,000 engine overhaul together, and in that whole process, our workforce develops a lot of skills that allows them to do more self-help things when they need it. They've got the confidence and the experience. The OEM can also take a look at our stores and our tools on board the ships and leave behind things that are missing or we couldn't find.
Is that part, so bringing the OEM, is that built into bringing them along? In other words, you are going to train, you're going to do a left seat, right seat, you're going to
Yes, but there's a little bit of a trick to that, because I'm not bringing them on to do training, because that creates all kinds of other questions about, is this a training thing or no? I'm bringing them on to do maintenance, but I'm going to augment their workforce, and training is the byproduct of that, not the purpose.
Tom, that's fascinating, because on the ship side, because on the fixed wing side, I see the partnership that we have with Warner Robins, because with the C-17 program depot maintenance, roughly half the airplanes go to Georgia to organic, and the other half come to San Antonio. But we try to share best practices and to help each other, especially if we're going to have common problems, right? So we're sharing information, but that to me is a win-win for both.
Yeah, I mentioned to a crowd earlier, I don't know that I've seen this much drive to merge industry with the military, maybe ever, and knocking down some of those barriers. Again, doesn't happen overnight, but I think it's happening. Okay, next one here. What sustainment vulnerability keeps you up at night in the first 30 days of a high-end conflict? Oh, that's a good one. In the first 30 days of a high-end conflict, what sustainment vulnerability keeps you up at night?
So let me start with that one, because it's maybe it's not quite the answer I think you're thinking to hear. Yeah. I enjoyed some of the questions I heard earlier about, I can't recapitalize my forklift. I've got, depot arsenal of things that I can't do. I think we are our own worst enemy with the red tape, the rules and the regulations it takes to get things done. So we are quickly going to have, all of our people are going to be exhausted, and they're going to be tapped out in their ability to do things. And so what I would say we should be looking at right now, not just for warfighting readiness, but for everything, is how do we expedite, how do we identify, clear those barriers that keep the people that we have from, focused on fixing things, not just all of the steps it takes to go through the contracting, the money, and the paperwork to get to the point where you can actually fix something.
Yeah.
We will tap ourselves out very quickly in that.
Absolutely.
From the Army perspective, we talk surge, and they say, well, what is your depots? How can you surge? or our arsenals, and they start talking about, well, what manning levels do you have, and how many shifts can you work, and that's all great. We can make everybody work overtime and add shifts, but the fact is, after 30 to 60 days, I'm going to be running out of parts from industry. All those people that I'm bringing on and working these extra shifts, I'm just going to, because we're not communicating, there is no, there's a minimum sustainment that the defensive industrial base is going to have, and those parts are going to be out, and so they're going to be standing around waiting on those other parts. So those are the things that we get concerned about, which is one of the reasons we want to show that consumption data and have a closer tie to our industrial partners, so that when we start surging, they know immediately, and we start seeing exactly which lines are surging, which parts, so they can get to work knocking down some of those red tapes, whether it be contracting or whatever, because that's what's going to be the delay. It's not going to be our actual capability, I don't think, or our actual workforce to surge. It's going to be the material they have to actually do the repairs.
Yeah, I think it gets into a point on deterrence from a sustainment lens. It's not only deterrence to prevent everything, but it's also deterrence during conflict, during crisis and conflict. And if we don't have the ability to sustain ourselves over time, certainly becomes a part of the calculus in decision making. Any other thoughts?
I would just to add to that thought, I think that what we're seeing in terms of contracting is really trying to get after some of those challenges. So when we start talking about multi-year contracts that create longer term agreements, can enable industry, and you can challenge me on that if you disagree, but it creates a longer term investment window where you know that you are going to receive benefit from it, and you can get other sources of capital and other ventures to help you that create a benefit both for industry and for us, that ensure that we'll have supplies there for the long term.
That's true, but one of the things we've seen over the last 2 years is the number of long-term contracts the industry is not as willing to sign. I don't know from the DLA perspective, but we're seeing that. I'm actually shocked at that, because I always think, oh, what a great benefit, we'll give you this long-term contract. And they're like, yeah, there's so many unknowns with some of the pricing and some of the, that's not the answer as much as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so we continue to try and evolve some of our thought processes. So I was talking about how we are modernizing our infrastructure. And what we're finding is that it's difficult to find a negotiated position where they're willing to cost for a long enough period, right? That's usually, it's like costing, and it's how much they want to price in risk. And then on our side, how much we want to pay for that increased risk inside the contract. So we've started trying to layer different, what we call economic price adjustment clauses into our contracts, where we would say, okay, we're going to put our materials on a benchmark. And so we don't want you to price in the cost of material change. We will put that, and we'll adjust based on market forces for whatever the commodity might be, steel or you name it. We're doing the same thing now for labor. We're looking at, can we benchmark labor prices so that we can, the government can take on some of that risk in labor and in material, then can we find a way to find better extensions on our contract terms?
If I may, one thing that keeps me up at night related to all that is, it kind of resulted in the Lockheed Martin PAC-3, increased production, but running out of stores. And I guess I never really thought of that until, last year with the shooting war between Iran and Israel, where, there was some serious concern. Iran's got more drones than we have Patriots, so what are we going to do when we run out? So the answer is, we increase production. One, industry can't turn on a dime, so I think what you were saying about, the investment, that's spot on. But then put my engineering hat on, two things. Put my finance hat on. Well, there is no endless pot of money, what is the right number? And I think AI, data analytics can help us get to that number. But whatever it is, then I put my engineering hat on. What do we do now with all these stores when they sit for years and years? And then how do we keep them operational so they're ready to go at a moment's notice? Very challenging problem, but to me, that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. From a very tactical perspective, I could lean on distribution capability, you could lean on magazine depth, and a number of other things. We've got about 5 minutes left here, so I'm going to I'm going to go back to one question here, and if you all will maybe weigh in for a minute on this one, and it kind of gets to a theme for all of you out in the audience, and that is our people, the talent pool that we have in the Department of War, not only those in uniform, but those in the federal workforce and those also who are our industry partners. And that gets to talent management. And how do you keep people challenged? How do you keep people trained and current? And how do you make sure that you've got a vibrant workforce that is stable and predictable over time? Because at the end of the day, and you hear this almost in every speech, that our asymmetric advantage is our people. But leadership, all of you in the audience here, keep our people engaged, informed, and a true asymmetric advantage when you look at our adversaries. So I'll just go ahead and start. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You, Patrick.
From an agency's perspective, when we look across our workforce, whatever exposure, experience, training they can get on things tied to the most current technology in terms of artificial intelligence, those kind of areas. I think operational research and exposure to doing OA assessments and those kind of things is absolutely huge. Any type of opportunities that they can do a partnership with industry. There's a program called EWE in the Air Force, and others have that as well. But getting them, and it's not teaching them about the business as much as they're getting exposed to that while they're thinking operationally to have that symbiotic relationship and understanding. And then to elevate it to a larger perspective, when we think about leadership, learning how to think. Strategic thinking is really important. How do I, as a small team dynamic, come up with a decision in a very pressurized environment, fail forward, take a knee, reset, and go back and do it again, and have that experiential learning piece to it in a really pressurized environment. And then I think finally, train where we fight. So actually go to where we're going to be and practice, and do that collectively together. Bring suppliers in as we're doing exercises, as we're doing TTXs. Bring them into the classified briefings. Do all those things together. Train where we're gonna do the job.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, so people solve problems. I've talked about the Skunk Works. We have more technology in our pockets today than any of those people did collectively. So technology is great, but people solve problems. And so I think what we found is people have lost some of the ability to frame problems, to solve themselves, and being able to see that they can fail and learn through that. And so we are working with our teams to grow them and help them solve problems and give them, so often we admire problems and like to push problems to other people to solve. And so I think that's the best thing that we can do for our talent management is to help them, equip them with problem solving skills, allow them to fail, allow them to learn, give them that feedback. Some of the things I echo the things you talked about, but I think that's from my perspective, we got to let them do it. Erica.
So over the last 10 years, there have been major changes to our workforce. From the COVID pandemic, changed the way how we work, where we work, generational changes as we see the retirement of the baby boomers and the incoming of the millennials. All of these changes mean the way that we were taught to manage a workforce is not the way we need to manage the workforce of the future. The way we think about people, we shouldn't be trying to fix the people of the past. We need to be providing for the people of the future. So the first step is, in being grateful, listen to what the workforce wants and needs, and then ask ourselves, how can we change? How can we break down red tape? How can we create offerings that are different than the way that we've done them before, but just as effective, because it brings in a different workforce that is just as passionate and just as capable. So things like distributing our capabilities. Our depots, it's going to be difficult to work on a ship or work on an airplane anywhere but inside the depot. But it doesn't mean that all the componentry has to be worked on inside the depot. Many of those components are on a rotatable pool, and they can be worked on around the country. So where can we open up new avenues around the country? Where can we make us more adaptable and think differently? We also, if we're not forging anymore, things like advanced manufacturing, it's more computerized, actually lend themselves well to, I'll say, our kids, my kids, that enjoy video games, enjoy computers. How can we bring those technologies together? We just have to think, act, and operate differently.
Great.
And for us, it's focused on hey, why do people want to come work for us, and why do they want to stay with us? You know, the work, I think, is fascinating. It's important. I think we have great people. It's really focused on all those dissatisfiers of, I don't have enough time, you make this too hard, you ask for too much. How do we clear those barriers away so people stick with it and they get to focus on what they enjoy, what we need them to enjoy doing? And then on the development side, it's just, we found with our more junior folks is spending the quality time to understand, hey, where do you see yourselves 3, 5 years down? How do we help you get there? Whether it's to stay within our organization or to go to somewhere else in the government. It's just basic good leadership principles that we're trying to foster from a management and leadership perspective.
Yeah, and finally, to me, we're lucky because we have a mission that everybody can rally around. Everybody, so we've got that. But from what I've learned about leadership over the years, especially working with manufacturing over the time, I've always found the why. We need to do a better job of explaining to the maintainer the why it's important. Some of my best examples are where I've, as the engineer, explained to the mechanic why the double drilled hole that they had and why the repair's got to be this way. I'm not trying to turn them into an engineer, but what I'm trying to do is give them an informed mindset, because I think an informed mechanic is a better one, more effective. So I think as a whole, we need to do a better with the why.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're about out of time now. Thank you all for the great questions, and thank you all for what you do to the panel members. Your insights were great for me. I echo the sentiment. I certainly learned a lot from the discussion, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks, General Neville and panelists. And for the record, Andy, I remember Blue Mail. Nobody else might, but I remember Blue Mail.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, that was great. I certainly hope, before everybody runs out, I got a couple things to say. But number one, I certainly hope people were taking notes, because I was. That was an awful lot of really good information. And so thank you all very much. Yep. All right. So that concludes this morning's activities. You guys don't have to hang around. I'm just going to make a couple announcements. Thank you all. Remainder of today's schedule includes networking in the exhibit hall, afternoon breakout sessions starting at 13:30 and 15:30, and the exhibit hall will be open from 17 to 1900. I also want to remind everyone about the Knowledge Bar located in the exhibit hall, featuring several senior leaders and subject matter experts who will be there. A very small group opportunity to talk directly with senior leaders. I think, yep, there's the Knowledge Bar schedule. So really, I encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity for a small, intimate conversation. One final announcement: we will start tomorrow's plenary session at 08 with recorded comments from the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So not surprisingly, he couldn't be here. He has other things he is doing, but he did take the time to record comments for us, specifically oriented toward you all, regarding his thoughts about contested logistics, about logistics deterrent, about where we are in the environment. And for those of you that were here at last year's symposium, you recall that General Mahoney was one of our keynote speakers. So thank you all for your attention this morning. Lunch is being served in the exhibit hall.